It is not the job of anyone else to create a safety net for you. It is, indeed, yours. And a safety net ought to start with a secure space, in the very physical and real sense. But what does secure mean? Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alrighty, so this is a video from the Practicing Liberty as a Lifestyle Choice category, which I've been promising for quite some time now, just like I've been promising a lot of other videos, which I've slowly delivered or will slowly deliver eventually. So, the main limitation of this presentation has to be that it will be difficult to understand, largely because some things are better left out from the public conversation about this topic, which means some will take this presentation as an endorsement for the prepper lifestyle, even though it isn't, or an endorsement for various types of defeatist schools of thought, even though it absolutely isn't. Nevertheless, I shall try to be as precise as possible in my language in order to convey as much as possible without leaving too much room for essentially misinterpretation. So, for the purposes of this talk, the presentation is divided as follows. 1. What is a secure space? 2. When one might need one. 3. How to pick the location. 4. Minimum requirements on how to build it. 5. Overview of the costs. 6. Maintaining the secure space. And 7. Conclusions. So let's dive in. So what is a secure space? Well, the best definition that I can come up with is this. A secure space is a physical space in which an individual can be reasonably safe for at least 6 months from the most reasonably expected challenges. So, for instance, aiming to build a secure space to keep you safe from a nuclear holocaust is not reasonable. If a nuclear holocaust happens, you're toast anyway. Similarly, aiming to build a secure space to keep you safe from a foreign invasion is a bit dicey. It's possible, but unless you're willing to pay millions of dollars, it's pretty hard, and it's not worth it. Even situations of world wars still featured areas with little or no violence. Nationwide wars also don't mean nationwide violence. Even as we speak, there are perfectly decent, nice and safe areas in Yemen, literally a war-torn country, which is why you should exert wisdom in picking the location. In fact, location is 50% or more of the job. Building and spending the necessary money is the easy part, really. The hard part is the location. Also, a secure space is not a fort. Preppers build forts. Wise men build secure spaces. A difference is very important. The purpose of a secure space is to be a safety net, a place to withdraw, regroup, and eventually come back from. Not a place to withdraw and wage a resistance fight, though in some cases they can be used for that too. And one more characteristic of a secure space is that it is discreet, but in a way that blends in. In other words, a secure space can be anywhere. The more otherwise visible, the better. Timeless wisdom tells us that the best place to hide something is in plain sight. Once again, preppers go in the woods, men of wisdom first keep a foothold in civilization, because you never know when it might come in handy. All right. Now that we have an idea about what we're talking about, let's move to number 2, when one might need a secure space. And I guess I should probably go with the question of who needs one as well. Ideally, everyone should have one, but that's hardly realistic, not to mention that even many men of wisdom may not need such a space ever, let alone basic plebs. Nevertheless, the situations in which one might need such a place are pretty diverse, and the way things are going, it's going to get even more diverse than in the past, at least for the next several decades. I mean, who knows, maybe by 2070 something fundamental changes, either for the better or for the worse. But for the time being, and for the foreseeable future, the number of situations in which one might need a secure space is bound to increase. The situations that I have personally witnessed when individuals needed such a place are as follows. First of all, dishonorable loss of employment, which with or without merit, but especially without. This includes situations like getting fired because you uttered politically incorrect phrases, getting fired as a result of lies, usually by women against men, getting fired as a result of placing superior value on honesty over ideology, and things of that nature. Basically, when your life is turned upside down as a result of a mob, be it online or offline, a secure space is needed. For instance, David Silverman, formerly the president of American Atheists, is a chap who would have benefited tremendously from a secure space. I listened to his chat with Sargon of Akkad, and for about half a second I felt sorry for the guy. But then I stopped being sorry, and I was in fact glad it happened to him, because he's one of those people who refuses to learn until reality punches him in the throat. Another instance when one might need secure spaces during a mental breakdown. Now, of course, this does depend entirely on the person, but many people do need a physical space in which they're just goddamn left alone for a little while, and afterwards they'll be fine. Somewhat connected to this is the instance when one might be a victim of terrible leaks, like images of your indiscretions or revenge porn or anything of this caliber. Another situation when one might need a secure space is for relaxation. In fact, this is a lot more common than people think. Almost every person under a lot of stress has a need for such a secure space, whether they label it like this or not. The purpose of this video is to tell you how to do it thoroughly, but the concept itself is nowhere near as rare as it may seem. Anyway, the secure space for relaxation is different from a retreat. A retreat is something known. A secure space is something not known even to most friends, because it's known by too many people. If it is known by too many people, it is no longer secure. Its security has been breached, basically. So, as you can see, there are many reasons and situations when one might need such a space. Now, you may say that you don't need one, and if that's the case, fine. Though I would say congratulations for being such an impeccable and without sin person that is 110% adapted to modernity. Get my point? Even if you may not need one right now, you should still consider that you might need one in the future. Can you seriously guarantee that nothing will change for the worse in your situation? I mean, unless you're a lumberjack somewhere remotely, in which case your whole life and your livelihood is a secure space. Unless you're that, you will, for sure, at some point in time, be needing a secure space. Also, keep in mind that you may already have it, and you just don't know it yet. Alright, number 3. How to pick the location. There are 3 factors, well, actually 4 factors that you need to take into consideration. Accessibility, reliability, discretion opportunities, number 4, financial efficiency. Financial efficiency is last because it really does depend on how much you want or you can afford to spend on this. Though, in my experience, there is something called the law of diminishing returns after a certain amount, usually around $60,000. You're not getting anything better if you spend more than that. Anything above that is just too much, unless you're building your secure space in a big, expensive city, which you shouldn't. And you shouldn't because the amount of discretion opportunities is much lower in a very big city. Ideally, a secure space is in a mid-sized town that is as average as possible in terms of wealth. So not a wealthy suburb and definitely not a slum. Population-wise, the locality should be no bigger than 100,000 inhabitants, but no smaller than 50,000 inhabitants. Anything below 50,000 people is a locality in which everyone knows everyone, which means you can kiss goodbye to your discretion unless you have a strong personality to use in order to dominate the whole place, which I don't recommend even trying because a lot of things can go wrong in the process, thus permanently ending your chances of anything even remotely coming close to discretion. Anything beyond 100,000 or maybe 120,000 is already a big city, which means it will get expensive and, perhaps most important, it will get excessive surveillance and monitoring, and with that, your discretion goes out on the window. A locality of 70 or 80,000 people is big enough to provide access to basic civilizational needs in a satisfactory manner, but small enough to allow a rather discreet existence without too much interference from anyone, really. On the reliability front, it is ideal that your secure space can be easily protected physically, which is why oftentimes apartments are ideal for that, or alternatively, if the local market and your money allows, a large property in such a way that there is a long and narrow walk from the entrance to the house. Also, on reliability, your property has to be in a jurisdiction that allows for anonymous paying of bills and keeping the utilities on for months or even years on end without anyone ever inspecting anything, as long as the bills are being paid. This is a lot easier to achieve than people imagine. You just need to study the rules very carefully. If you can't find such a jurisdiction, pay someone to teach you. If that fails too, then you might want to consider another country. And this is where it gets complicated, because accessibility means exactly what it says. Your secure space must be no further than 24 hours from where you're usually located in during your public life. And even 24 hours is a stretch. Your secure space has to be accessible within the same day, or at worst, next day in the morning. So that can be tricky if you choose another country, though of course it depends on the country and your current location. If you're located in Slovenia, it's not hard to do that, since another country is just 2 and at worst up to 4 hours of drive. But if you're located in northern USA, that gets complicated because Mexico is too far away and Canada is not really an option. Also, if you do choose another country, do make sure it's a country whose language you speak or are willing to learn very soon, because you need to be able to at least look the part as a local and don't stand out too much. Also, there are some shortcuts available for some people. If you're due to inherit a low-value property, don't sell it. Make that your secure space. Here in Europe, it's pretty common for those who inherit to just leave the utilities on the deceased's names and just keep on paying the bills and avoiding letting any institution know that some new peeps are in town. This is possible, by the way, since nobody's gonna cut your power or your gas just because you haven't updated the contract. As long as the bills are being paid, nobody really cares. This is a lot harder to pull off in the United States, unfortunately, but the US has other hacks, such as blind trusts, the ability to legally assign property managers, which means no institution gets to see your face ever, and a whole plethora of tricks that don't exist here in Europe, or if they do, are a lot more complicated than in the United States. The point is that you should be striving to make it really hard for any third party to learn that that particular property is yours and your secure space. Again, nothing is fully secure, but as I always say, there is a difference between doing something and achieving somewhere between 60 to 95% privacy and doing nothing and having 0% privacy. No matter how many political ideologues try to convince you otherwise, transparency is not a virtue. Quite the opposite. Transparency means your ass is out in the wind to be taken down by the first malicious actor that is willing to work for a few days. Your job is to make the potential malicious actors work harder. Most do give up after 3 days. By 90 days, the vast majority of those who may want to target you have long given up. And that's good enough, because again, we're building a secure space, not a fort. So yeah, that's how you pick a location. No more than 24 hours for you to get there, reliability in terms of basic amenities, discretion opportunities, and financial efficiency. Follow these four and the options will basically reveal themselves to you. All right. Number 4, minimum requirements on how to build it. So now you own a place. You bought it anonymously, or you somehow ended up owning it somewhat anonymously. Great. Now there are a few things you must do in order to make it secure. First of all, get an anonymous internet connection at the location. Again, very easy to do in Europe, a lot harder to do in the US, but it's possible in both places. Obviously, I won't get into details because it's privileged information for consultation and, well, private use. That and the fact that every situation is quite unique, and I don't want this video to be 3 hours long. Anyway, once you get your anonymous internet connection, create an alternate persona that you only use at that location. There's multiple tools online that generate perfectly legit sounding fake names to use online. You may think it's immoral, you may think people shouldn't be able to lie online, but the reality is that they do, and they can, and it's not illegal. So build a persona, and anything related from and to the secure space must absolutely be dealt with exclusively through that persona. In other words, never connect your secure space with your real identity in the online unless you have to. And more often than not, you really don't have to. Then you have to build what I like to call parallel infrastructure, namely an internal offline surveillance system, multiple spaces in which to hide stuff, and a modified electrical installation. That is to say, make the de facto situation as different as possible from the de jure situation. Nobody should have real information about your secure space. The more obfuscation, the better. If you can have a basement without anyone knowing, do that too. If you build the house yourself and only bought the land, make sure you build as much of it as possible by yourself in order to leave room for improvements that the town hall does not and cannot know about. And perhaps the hardest part, make sure you blend in with the community. Spend some time there at first. Be as average as possible, but make sure your existence is somewhat known. Nobody suspects the average, albeit quiet dude. But everyone suspects the hermit, so make sure you don't look like a hermit. Not at first anyway. At some point you'll be part enough of the community, but in the first year make sure you're minimally engaged just enough to be a rando from around the block. One last thing in the building department, supplies. And I don't mean food, although some long-lasting food should be there too, but I mean supplies of things that are not readily available all the time, such as a drilling machine, printer, spare parts for computers, tools, cigarettes, batteries, fuel, everything necessary for the place to be able to sustain you in most tasks in case you're short on cash. That's why I opened the video talking about a safety net. This place should be your safety net. That means it has to be functional in your worst situations, not just when you want to relax. All right. Number 5, overview of the costs. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that anything beyond $60,000 is too much and defeats the purpose. That's because the point of a secure space is not to stand out, but to blend in. An expensive space stands out, and you don't want that. However, I've seen secure spaces being made with less than $10,000, though admittedly in Europe or in Asia. It helps a lot if you're skillful or willing to learn some skills on the fly, and those can lower the costs quite a lot if you do things yourself. Moreover, making things yourselves, if you do that, this also means you get the necessary minimum period spent in the community, thus lowering the burden on you overall in the construction phase by saving up time in addition to saving up on cash. Obviously, the most expensive part is the space itself, the property. Now, I know of 2 cases where individuals built in a cheap property for rent. Now, that can be an option, though not one that I would recommend, even if you can easily afford the rent. A property that you can't control entirely is a very poor candidate for a secure space. But once you got the property, then the rest of the costs can get pretty small. Even in expensive countries. I mean, I know a chap who built his secure space in Norway for about $2,000. But yes, he inherited the property, so there's that. Nevertheless, with the guidelines I provided, the cost of the property itself should not be too high. I mentioned in the article, well, actually not in the article, in the video that I made about debt, that even in the good old USA, notorious for its high prices in real estate, one can still find quite big properties for $40K. Heck, I found really nice houses for under $10K in Michigan, and no, not in Detroit, though there you can find for as little as $3,000 even today. But I also found pretty nice land in quiet places in Florida for $13,000 in an area with little zoning in which you can make a beautiful, secure space. So look up closely. You can lower the burden quite a lot if you really want to. You just need to be calm, don't hurry up, and always keep in mind that the purpose of a secure space is not to be luxuriant, but to be a safety net. And your own safety net is much better than any government-provided one, believe me. I mean, I myself didn't believe this 20 years ago, but nevertheless went along with the idea of a secure space. And when I went bankrupt, that secure space allowed me to live better as an unemployed person with 0 state benefits, better than many of those employed and allegedly more responsible. Seriously, it's not that hard to make it. Not to mention, you don't have to have everything done in 3 months. You can take your time, especially considering that a secure space has to be secure from a financial standpoint too, so no mortgages and really no debt. Or if you have to, then make sure that that is not connected in any way to your secure space. That space has to be free of any interference of this kind. So with that, let's move to number 6, maintaining the space. So one thing I already mentioned, no debt. Never mortgage the secure space, never use it as a guarantee for anything. The fewer people know that it even exists, the better. Ideally, no more than 3 people should know about it. The fewer people that know for sure that that discrete place is yours, the better. In time, you are liable to making mistakes, of course, and accidentally disclose things that lead to the place, which is why, as part of the maintaining process, you should work to create as much obfuscation as possible. And by obfuscation, I don't just mean online, that is of course mandatory, but offline too. Create several narratives that lead as far away as possible from that place. For instance, when I go to my own space, no more than 2 people know where I'm going. Everyone else either doesn't know or thinks I'm somewhere else completely. Now, admittedly, it has become easier for me because everyone who knows me a bit inevitably knows that I travel a lot and that I like my discretion, so I don't have to answer too many unwanted questions. But this is the age of anti-privacy, extroversion, and your life on social media. So you will raise some eyebrows. And the best way to counteract that is to create obfuscation. Yes, that may include some outright lying from time to time, though scientific lying is recommended, like CNN does. Put 70% truth, 20% vague spin, and 10% lies. And make sure it's very hard to discriminate which is which. Again, this may sound awful to some of you, but the reality is that you do have a right to privacy, and no, you don't have an obligation to be truthful to everyone about your whereabouts or about your activities, especially not to coworkers, the clerk at the store, the waiter, or anywhere in the online environment. And you don't even have to put in much effort. According to science, About 60% of the people can't go for 10 minutes without lying at least once. In 60 minutes, the percentage goes as high as 99%. All you need to do is to adapt. Stop telling lies randomly, which you do, because everyone unconsciously does it, and get conscious about it. At the end of the process, you will end up telling fewer lies, thus getting your behavior in a morally superior category, but you will also end up telling more useful lies when you do. Another aspect of maintaining is to make sure you don't commit crimes related to that property. Be as squeaky clean as possible, and if you do commit crimes, make sure those are in the area's average. So for instance, if most people in the area are lax about noise after a certain hour, then it's okay if you do it from time to time as well. But if the area is known for its quietness, then don't stand out. You be bloody quiet as well. The idea is to keep the space clean from any interference by the law until you actually need it in one of the many emergencies that can appear. If the property is not on the radar of the police, then it's a lot more secure than if it's a property on which there have been serious or semi-serious run-ins with the law. On the obfuscation part that obfuscation point that I made earlier, do make sure to maintain that too. If you obfuscate your ownership of the property, make sure you pay the bills in time and make sure the property never stands out. Now, it really does depend on how far you're willing to go, because you can go pretty far with the obfuscation without breaking any law. For instance, you can purchase a car anonymously and only use that car to get to the property, thus associating that car with the property in the community's mind, so you're not easily recognizable when you're outside of the area. Getting a permanent parking spot somewhere around the community, let's say 50 kilometers away, might be a good deal. Whatever you choose though, make sure you keep that consistent for several years. Once you picked a routine, stick to it for as long as possible, and if you don't, someone will notice. Now, if you're lucky, someone not important will notice, but even so, one layer of your secure space would have been peeled. So it's important to maintain the appearances and the expectations that you set up. Another aspect to keep in mind in maintaining is utilities. There are multiple ways to keep the utility bills somewhat balanced. Make it so that it is hard from the consumption to figure it out when you're not at the property or how long you're usually out. And most of the ways to do this are perfectly legal, such as subscribing for payment every 3 or 6 months, thus not recording monthly statistics. For electricity, there are devices that you can plug and set them to consume a certain amount, or even easier, get something that consumes in a month about the amount you need. A stronger light in your basement, or something that is not overtly visible, but keeps the paper illusion that you're there most of the year and makes it harder, even for dedicated peeps, to figure out your schedule. Basically, maintaining is just as much about discretion as it is about maintaining a property in general. Of course, make sure no food gets spoiled, make sure nothing smells weird to outsiders. All of that is not just basic common sense, but also necessary in the process of not standing out. So yeah. Okay, number 7, conclusions. Secure spaces, or safe spaces if you want, are something of a necessity, especially for those who deal with controversial stuff, but also for those who need a place that is separate from their mainstream life. Again, ideally, most people should have that, but that is hardly possible. However, with a bit of fiscal conservatism and basic common sense, most people can have it if they really want to. Again, nothing of what I said here implies that one should strive to accomplish this in 3 months. On average, it takes about 4 years to establish a legit secure space, sometimes even a bit more than that. But at some point in life, you will thank yourself for having built it. And having such a space is an additional layer of safety for yourself. You don't have to be one emergency away from disaster or homelessness. You don't have to be helpless. Help yourself when you can, so you can then help yourself even when times are tough. Again, a secure space is basically an insurance policy, just like having fuck you money is an insurance policy. Trust me, life becomes a lot easier when you know for a fact that if things go really south, you'll still be living better than most people and you can afford a few months to regroup and come up with a different approach. So, what do you all think? Keep in mind that this is hardly a new idea of mine. I just dressed it in more intelligible terms for modernity. But this idea of a personal sanctuary has been around for thousands of years, and it's especially men of wisdom who strived to have them. I'll be glad to answer some of your questions, though. Of course, the more specific ones should be left for private consultation. Not just because I want money, but also because it is deeply unwise to offer detailed answers in a public forum. You're all smart peeps, you get the point. So yeah, with all of that being said, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your consistent and generous support. Please do subscribe to our social media, visit our website, consider giving a donation should you derive any value from the work being done here, and I will see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative.